The Living End are one of Australia's greatest rock bands with an impressive career spanning the better part of 3 decades with several successful albums. Prisoner of Society is one of the biggest and best punk rock songs to ever come out of Australia, having an enormous impact on the charts and Aussie youths in the late 90s. Despite an incredibly successful run of 6 albums, they started to fall off with the last 2 albums falling short of the quality that they were known for. The Living End have been touring and playing festivals, drawing large crowds at home to witness their energetic and entertaining live shows. What have the Living End been up to for the past 7 years, and why did their last 2 albums fall short? Stay a while as I take you through the impressive career of the Living End. To understand the Living End's impressive career, we have to go back to the beginning. The story of the Living End begins with Chris Cheney and Scott Owen meeting at a primary school in Melbourne after being introduced by their older sisters, striking up what would become an incredible friendship. Cheney and Owen began performing together in 1990 while they were in high school, playing their first public gig in 1991. Cheney's love of rockabilly convinced Owen to pick up the double bass, switching from piano. The duo formed a cover band called the Runaway Boys, covering Stray Cats and Clash songs. The boys were playing in the rockabilly scene at first before expanding their audience to regional towns in Victoria and supporting a band called Mercury Blue. While the duo were coming up through the local scene and studying between 91 and 93, they cycled through a few drummers. 1994 arrives and the duo are taking the band more seriously, writing their own material and changing their name to The Living End, which was a reference to the film Rock Around the Clock. Cheney played guitar and sang lead vocals, Owen played double bass and sang backing vocals, and Joe Piripizzi was locked in to play drums. The trio recorded their first track titled Headlines, which was written by Cheney and Owen. In an attempt to land a supporting slot for a major international band, the boys sent a shirt and demo tape to Billie Joe Armstrong from Green Day. It paid off, with the band landing a slot for Green Day's supporting tour of Australia in 95. Fast forward to early 95, where the Living End played the tour and recorded more songs afterwards for their debut EP titled Hellbound. The band produced their debut EP under the Mushroom Records label, receiving airplay from community radio stations. With momentum starting to build, a second EP was being written by the band in the latter half of 95, eventually being recorded in June of 96. The second EP was titled It's For Your Own Good. The EP was co-produced by Lindsay Gravina, Mike Alonso, and the band, released under the Rapido label. The EP later charted at 99 on the ARIAs in March of 97, and was reviewed well by critics, scoring 4 or 4.5 stars out of 5. One of the reasons this EP did so well was due to the song From Here On In being an incredible single. Triple J placed the song on high rotation, bringing further attention to the band. Not long after this, Piripizzi was booted from the band due to poor lifestyle choices, with Travis Dempsey joining not long after. With the lineup locked in again, the band were added to major Aussie festivals including Pushover and the Falls Festival. Between releasing EPs and touring, the boys were writing and recording 2 fresh new songs to sell at their live shows. In January of 98, the band supported The Offspring on their tour of Australia and released the second Solution, Prisoner of Society, double A-sided single. Everything else, up until this point, could be considered small but momentum-building breaks in a merciless industry. This EP changed all of that, becoming the major break the band needed to propel them to the next stage of their career. The release peaked at number 4 on the ARIA singles chart, achieving double platinum status with more than 140,000 units sold. It sold so many units down under, it took out the top spot for the highest selling single category at the ARIA Music Awards. This single was so popular, it was the highest selling single of the 90s, residing in the top 50 charts for a whopping 47 weeks. Not content to remain popular in only one country, in October of 98, the single charted at 28 in New Zealand, later charting in the top 200 in the UK in 99, and 23 on the alternative singles charts in the US. Second Solution and Prisoner of Society have both appeared in pop culture through a video game and film. With the immense success of Second Solution and Prisoner of Society, the Living End signed to Modular Recordings in 98, gearing up to record their debut self-titled album. Self-titled exploded onto the charts at the top spot on the 12th of October of 98, produced by Gravina and the band, with recording taking place at Sing Sing Studios in Melbourne. The self-titled album dwarfed the single, going 4 times platinum, shipping more than 280,000 units. At the time, this was the second highest selling debut rock album in Australian history. Critics were fond of the album, scoring anywhere from 3.5 to 4 out of 5 stars. At the ARIAs in 99, the album won 2 awards for Best Group and Breakthrough Artist Album. Out of the 14 songs on the album, there are only a few that don't really land for me, including Trapped, Fly Away and Sleep On It. Everything else but is superb, with the highlights being Prisoner of Society, Second Solution, West End Riot, Bloody Mary, All Torn Down and Save the Day. This is one of the greatest punk rock albums to ever come out of Australia and has been recognised in the book titled 100 Best Australian Albums. With their debut album and supporting tour out of the way, the trio were writing their highly anticipated follow-up. The year 2000 arrives with the band having written new material, heading to Sing Sing Studios again in July, this time with producer Nick Launay of Midnight Oil and Silverchair fame. Roll On released a few months later on the 27th of November. This would be the last album to feature Travis Dempsey as he departed, making way for Andy Strachan, joining and remaining in the band from April of 2002. The album peaked at number 8 on the Aussie charts and 34 across the ditch over in New Zealand. Commercially, this album was still successful, however, it didn't reach the same heights as their enormous debut, only going double platinum with more than 140,000 units sold. Roll On and Pictures in the Mirror did well as singles, charting at 15 and 18 respectively. There are a few reasons for this one failing to achieve the same success. Roll On sounded more polished and lost some of that punk energy, sounding more rock-oriented. Chris Cheney mentions he was trying to prove that the band weren't defined by the sound of Prisoner of Society. Critics were fond of the album, scoring between 3 and 4 stars. This is still a fantastic album, with only a couple songs not doing it for me, including Blood on Your Hands and Read About It. The real standout tracks for me are including Roll On, obviously, Killing the Right, Uncle Harry, and Carry Me Home. Cheney proves how underrated his lead playing really is with the intro to Carry Me Home, one of my all-time favourites from the band. It's just one of those unskippable songs when it pops up on my playlist. The song even appeared on Guitar Hero 2. The trio picked up some US coverage when they played on Conan O'Brien and David Letterman's late-night shows. It wasn't all smooth sailing during this period, however, as Cheney was involved in a car accident with the frontman unable to play for more than 2 months while he was in hospital. With Cheney healed up and the Roll On tour cycle over, Dempsey left in February of 2002, with Strachan joining 2 months later in April. Cheney and Owen wanted to test their new material and Strachan out, so they created the Longnecks to play some smaller shows in regional areas. By mid-2002, The Living End recorded 4 new songs, including One Sent to the Other, which released on an EP in January of 2003. Mark Trombino, who had previously produced for Jimmy Eat World, worked with the boys on the 4 tracks, including the rest of Modern Artillery, given how well things were panning out. Modern Artillery, the band's third full-length album, was recorded in California, releasing under the EMI label on the 28th of October 2003. This is Andy Strachan's first album, with notable singles released including the infectious Who's Gonna Save Us and Tabloid Magazine, with both songs charting in the top 40. The album went platinum in Australia with more than 70,000 units sold, peaking at number 3 on the charts. The track End of the World appeared on Tony Hawk's Underground 2. 3 albums in a row that achieved a minimum of platinum certification, which is an impressive effort. With this album, however, it was clear that the sound of the band was heading in a more pop-punk, pop-rock and radio-friendly direction, with songs like Who's Gonna Save Us and Tabloid Magazine. I've probably only heard the album front to back maybe a few times. With that being said, they still managed to create End of the World, proving that they could still channel that rockabilly sound when they want to. It's definitely one of my favourite songs to see them play live. Heavy touring followed to support the album, including playing the Big Day Out Festival. Almost a year later, the trio put out From Here On In, a singles compilation album and a separate DVD documenting the band's history and sections of live sets. With another album cycle done and dusted, The Living End were back in writing and recording mode. State of Emergency, album number 4, was up next. Nick Launay produced for the band again, with recording taking place at Studios 301 in Byron Bay. Recording and album art were done by the end of 2005. What's on Your Radio was the lead single off of the album, which did very well for itself, charting at number 9. Hugely popular when it released and pretty much the perfect song to give fans a taste of what was to come. State of Emergency released on the 4th of February 2006 under the EMI label, charting at number 1 in Australia and number 31 in New Zealand. Commercially, this was the band's 4th platinum album in a row, moving more than 70,000 copies, which really is an impressive run for an Aussie band struggling to break out of Australia. Critically, the album did well with a mix of 3 stars and upwards. Wake Up, the second single, released shortly after the album, charting at number 5 at home. The remaining singles all landed in the top 40. This is probably my most listened to album from the band, which released around my first year of high school. I'd come home from school, throw the album on, and sing along to every word. I don't have a single bad word to say about any song off of this one. The highlights for me would be Long Live the Weekend, Wake Up, What's on Your Radio, Black Cat, and Into the Red. Let me know your thoughts down below. In 2006, the album was nominated for a J Award. The band weren't done with 2006 yet, with Live at Festival Hall releasing in September and a tour of the US at the arse end of the year. Behind the scenes, however, Cheney was suffering from burnout and writer's block, so he left the band for a while to spend time with his family and other non-musical hobbies. While Cheney was overcoming his personal challenges, the band released a cover version of Cold Chisel's Rising Sun. With Cheney feeling better by 2007, the trio played the Great Escape Festival in April and kicked off work on album number 5 again whilst touring the UK in August. Prior to the impending release date of album 5, the lead single sharing the same name as the album, White Noise, peaked at number 12, taking out the 2009 Song of the Year at the APRA Awards. The album was recorded at Water Music Studios in New Jersey in 2008, produced by John Agnello, who had worked with Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan much earlier in his career. White Noise was released under the Due Process label on the 19th of July 2008, peaking at number 2 on the charts in Australia and reaching the 18th spot over in New Zealand. Despite a warm reception with critics scoring anywhere between 3 and 4 stars or favourable and a win for Best Rock Album at the 2008 ARIAs, the album only managed to achieve a gold certification with more than 35,000 units sold. The platinum certification run had ended, despite the album containing multiple quality songs including How Do We Know, Raise the Alarm and Make the Call. This is where The Living End started slipping with fewer memorable songs from here on in for me personally. With the album now out in the wild, The Living End were invited to play the NRL Grand Final in October, with the Raise the Alarm tour commencing in May of 2009. For most of 2010, The Living End were busy writing album number 6 with about 40 songs to choose from. The title track off of the new album, The Ending Is Just the Beginning Repeating, released as the lead single in June of 2011 across the nation's radio stations. The following month, The Ending Is Just the Beginning Repeating released in full under the Due Process label, with production handled by Nick Didier, who had previously produced for Powderfinger. The album was recorded between studios in Melbourne and Byron Bay. The album peaked at number 3 on the charts, achieving gold certification. Critics were still mostly fond of the album, scoring 3 to 4.5 stars out of 5, with the album taking out Best Rock Album at the 2011 ARIAs. Much like White Noise, the more memorable tracks aren't as frequent as their first 5 albums, featuring more toned-down radio rock. With that said, there still are some killer tracks to be found, including Heatwave, Away from the City, and The Ending Is Just the Beginning Repeating. A supporting tour of the album followed shortly after. In July of 2012, it was announced that throughout the last 2 months of the year, the band would be playing each of their 6 albums over the span of a week in 5 Australian state capitals. This would be called the Retrospective Tour. More touring followed in 2013, with the band heading to Europe again to play the UK and Germany. Back home in 2014, Summer Nats picked up the band for a show, and so did Soundwave Festival when Stone Temple Pilots pulled out. Between a series of supporting tours, the trio were writing again for album number 7, titled Shift. Shift released under Due Process again, with production handled by Paul Anderson, who had produced for Hunting Grounds previously, with the album recorded at Red Door Sounds in Melbourne. Shift released on the 13th of May 2016, peaking at number 4 on the charts. This marked the end of their certification run, which lasted for an incredible 6 albums over the span of roughly 13 years. Critics were all over the place on this one, from 2.5 stars all the way up to 5 out of 5. I've tried listening to Shift multiple times. Out of all of their albums, I can barely make it through this one. Apart from the song Death, everything else is just kind of boring and serviceable, which shocked me when it came out. I also really disliked the reverb they added to Cheney's vocals. I tried listening to it again 9 years later while researching and writing, and I still don't enjoy it. The band set off on a tour of Australia, followed by the US through June and August. I was cautiously optimistic when I heard the boys were working on album number 8. I was hoping that it didn't follow in the same footsteps as Shift. My fears would be alleviated when the lead single Don't Lose It released on the 22nd of June 2018. They sounded revitalised and energetic again. The world wouldn't have to wait much longer, as Wunderbar released under BMG on the 10th of July, just 1 month later. Tobias Kuhn produced and recorded the album in Germany across a few studios. This one peaked at number 3 and failed to receive a certification. Critics were happier with this one, with a bunch of positive reviews and one 4 out of 5 star review. Gone is the terrible reverb on the vocals for the most part, with some great songs including Don't Lose It, Other Side, and The Energetic Death of the American Dream and Proton Pill. Between 2018 and 2025, The Living End toured the US one more time and have done extensive touring across Australia through all of the non-lockdown years. And that brings us to present day 2025. The trio have written and recorded their first new music in roughly 7 years, releasing the catchy and energetic Alfie on the 15th of May 2025. If this song is a taste of what's to come, I'm excited. So, what does the internet have to say about these Aussie punk rockers? In response to a video of End of the World posted to Reddit, one user wrote, "Oh dang, I forgot about these guys. I was always a fan of Prisoner of Society. I think my CD got all scratched up though a long time ago," with another saying, "A great live band. Been following them since I saw them at a Warped Tour in Australia around 98 or 99. Over on YouTube, users had the following to say under the Prisoner of Society music video: "The band should be world famous, completely underrated. Fantastic musicians, great songs, and bloody Aussies. And massively underrated Aussie band, they went off live. Great songs." There's clearly a lot of love for The Living End after all these years. Despite never achieving the massive success of their self-titled album again and a long wait for album number 9, The Living End have truly had a stellar career spanning 8 albums across 3 decades. 6 of those albums have either gone multi-platinum, platinum, or gold, which you have to admit is an impressive run. Every album has went to the top of the charts, with the band going on regular tours and appearing on festival bills each year. The Living End are one of my favourite bands of all time. Watching Cheney play E-Boogie live with a VB Stubby as a slide and then drinking the remains is a memory I'll never forget. If the band's new single Alfie is anything to go by, their future remains bright. Thanks for watching.